In this tutorial I want to go into the theme of splitting up a part of the panorama to save RAM time, loading time, render time, whatever. And of course it's only for the background in this case, because a reflection wouldn't work with a partial panorama in this case. When we have a camera move like this here, for example, where the sphere is going around this pole and we need only a partial area of this panorama, we could think about to split it up and take exactly only that part of the panorama. How we do that? This is the part that I want to discuss here. There are other options, of course, inside of panoramas when we have a 6-side view, like the cross that we have discussed earlier on. And then we have 6 pages or 6 planes from a cube, and we can switch on and off the parts. I will discuss this as well. Okay, so let's go here to work, and what we need here is of course an idea where we have our camera through. And of course the simplest way would be to just film with this camera the background, maybe 1.5 higher in resolution, and then we get a long movie that might be per frame a good save, but not for our hard drive. And the quality suffers with every iteration of camera rendering and bring it back in and so on. So we need something where we can say exactly where we are. Okay, we could go now here, of course, and render this area and make a screenshot, for example. And here we see already we lose our little bars because I've made them a little bit darker so we can see which frame we have here. Scope size is that. We need something to measure this. And for that I have used here my 1600 by 800, my little color checker grid, where I can see exactly where I am. This is relatively rough, and I open this here so I can show you that again. You can have maybe more squares and everything. Each one has here 100 pixels roughly, and it's very helpful to have exactly this. By the way, the 360 by 180 are by default normally always twice in width than high. This can change, of course, but standard is really this ratio here, 2:1, and that helps us, of course, immensely now when I drag this here just over the sphere. And remember, it's mirror-sided, so I put a dash here and tile use in, and I put my attention here, for example, very closely, because we need to do that later on again. However, what we gain here is, of course, information that we can easily use. We don't have to say, yeah, it's the brown pole and the green roof in one corner and something else in the right. That might be a source for problems. When I move now the camera, I can say exactly, in this case, because the camera move is relatively simple, where I need my texture. And we have here different numbers with different colors, and these colors gives me here now an orientation where I have to go with my texture. And of course I have prepared this. So we can see here the blue 5 with the red background is in one side here very prominent. And then we go here to the other side, and then we see here the blue 2 in that pale bluish background. I hop over now to Photoshop to show you what I have done there. You might know this panorama already, and normally we would go ahead and take here just a Command and V when we had that checker grid already in use. I have done this here, and normally it comes not exactly in that size, but as it is 2:1 in ratio, you can just go ahead with the Command T and then scale it up so it fits pretty much in this way. Then we had here the 5 with the red background and the blue 2 with the pale bluish lilac whatever background. This is now our camera move here from here to here. And I would suggest highly to have a little bit padding around, so we can change the camera later on a little bit more without going back and forth. Again, this was a very wide angle camera. It would work in the same way with a small angle camera when the camera move is maybe larger. As I have done this here, I want to show you the guides that I have used here. So I went always back to Cinema 4D, checked out where I am, which square I can see here in my picture, and then went to Photoshop, set one of these rulers here. Command R gives you here the rulers, and then you can just drag these guys out. And this gives you here then exactly something that you can work with. And when you switch this then back, then you have here in the picture exactly this section. This is below half of the frame size here, which saves half of the RAM roughly said. And of course, when you have a smaller camera move with a longer lens, the area might be even smaller. You can go then and use the crop tool. I wouldn't use this because maybe you forget to go back after that and then you lose maybe everything. So I go here with the snapping and drag here a rectangle in selection, copy that and call up a new image. In a moment I copy that. The new command has exactly here this size, and then I go here to this panel and I paste this in. I prefer always straight values, so this one here was a little bit cleaned up. I was not so super precise there, but so I have the numbers more easily in my head, and I save this out. We have to keep this for a moment here alive, so we can count maybe the squares when we adjust and finally exactly the texture back in Cinema 4D. And for that I go now back to Cinema 4D. So back in Cinema 4D, the first thing that we have to do here is of course to go to new material and to load in the material. I stop here the play for a moment and we have of course to uncheck the receive, and we want to have the luminance channel as the one where we put our patch in. So I load here this one, and the patch is here, very small, and we leave it where it is, and that's all I have to do here for a moment to get the material in. And I have to drag this only here to the sky object, and it doesn't work. So when I play this again, before the sphere went around that brown pole, now it goes away from it, so something is wrong here. And the first thing that comes to mind is of course that we have worked here with a negative tile to have it mirror-sided. That is the first step. So is it now better? No, not at all, because we have now one texture cropped, but we wrap it around the whole sphere, or sky object in this case, and that stretches even the panorama more than we had this before. So the quality is lower and the distortion is of course maybe very visible. What we need to do here is to go back to Photoshop, and we have to count now squares. And there comes these squares in very handy, and I'll show you what I have in mind. The first thing that I want to do is of course to set up the right scale for that. So we have here 16 squares horizontally, but we have only 9 squares for our crop. So let's do that as first step. So I go here to my texture tag, and I go here into the length U, click here in front of the 100, and I leave the 100 there. I said we have 9 squares. We have to divide this by 16 to get the fraction, and then times -100, because we want to have 100% back. When I click in an empty space here, I get 56, so a little bit more than half, and that sounds right. 50% would be when we had 8 squares and we have 16 at all, so we need to have a little bit more. The next step is then go back here, and we have 5 square, and the whole thing would be 8. Same procedure here. So we go to length V, click in front of it, go to this and type 5 into it, divided by 8 and then times 100%. Click on another parameter field and get the result. This is way more over 50%, and that's right. So we can't really see what we're doing here, so I suggest to have a little helper here, and this would be another sphere. And when we drag this sphere here right under the sky object, we might see already what we are doing here. So I uncheck the camera, and my default camera gives me now here a much better view. And I can see here already something is going on, but I'm not really clear what I'm doing here. It is smaller now, and it is tiled, obviously. So let's uncheck tile, and we see here immediately that we get only a partial of that sphere. The background is a little bit distracting, so I click here to get it away, and a green one to get the sphere back. This is now here in proxy or just in demonstration object. What we need to do is now to get this point here, which is 0, to the point where we have it in Photoshop. And that means we have to offset two values, the offset U and the offset V. And we do this in the same way. What we need in terms of information is that we had 16 horizontally normally. I repeat myself here, sorry for that, but it's needed to make it complete, and we have 7 squares offset now for this patch here. So we go now back to Cinema, offset, and this time we go here with 7 divided by 16 times 100. And this gives us here an offset of 43.75. Sounds about right, because we had here in our Photoshop file the right side as border, so the offset with the size should give 100%. If this line would be inside, then we would have a different value, of course. So the next value is then here 2 squares. We have 8 in total. That means we go to offset V, 2 divided by 8 times 100. So we get an 100% value. Percent means per 100, and so we get here 25. Sounds about right when we have 8 at all, and 2 is a quarter of that. So let's have a look. That looks already much better. And the first check would be, of course, with the camera, if that works at all. So we need here our sphere, and we need to uncheck this and back to the square here. I think that's pretty much as it was before. So we can go ahead and type in selection just something. I use an X, for example. Can be anything that is not used in the scene so far. So we exclude this area here, and we can exclude this one here as well. And now I can't see a thing here because I have excluded that one here as well. So this looks so far very nice. This looks so far very nice, but to be honest, something is weird here. And let's have a look what it is. And when I go here again, let's put this here, this sphere exactly in front of a pole. And we take the X out of it, and we get a totally different image. So what happens here? We have to set the offset as well to negative in this case, because we work with mirror-sided textures here. And voila, we have everything exactly in the same way. So when I type here an X again in, there's only a little shift. That's my imprecision that I had in Photoshop. I was not exactly on point. As you have seen, I was with 1022 pixels instead of straight thousands in this way. So precision is here maybe needed if really that precision is requested. But you see, it's pretty simple with these squares, just to type in the number of squares and get then the value that you need. I go, just to show you that again, out of this, I want to have this sphere here in the middle, our proxy, and to show you what we get here finally with this method here. So I type this in. You have seen here that little shift. I put this here out so you can see that is our patch here. and I should use the shortcuts here for movement 1. And when I go now here again with an X in it, this is the background here, and here starts the patch. I type this patch here away. See, that little movement is there. And so we have done everything. We can go ahead if we like to and delete these two texture tags, go back to our standard, what we had here before, and we can even delete our proxy sphere. And when we take a look now to our camera move, we have only partially here the panorama in it, and everything works pretty much as before. To give you an idea that this has of course limitations, I go here with the material into the game and put this to reflection. And then you can see that we have really here now only a partial panorama, because this area here is now without any information. That's not nice when you need that for reflection, but for reflection you might need something smaller in size based on what we have discussed before. So optimizing the scene is always a good idea, and let's have a look how these 6-side panoramas works. What I have done here is of course to use directly without further conversion the St. Peter's Light Probe from 1999 from Paul Devevec, and thanks to him as usual for being so generous with his stuff. And I use this here, not based that I have not stuff on my own, but this is the easiest way that you can have it all over the place. You can download it at wherever you have access to a computer and web. What I like on this is of course that we can split those things in 6 little images, and based on the camera move we might have only the need to use 2 or 3 or 4, so we can easily decide what is really needed and what is wanted in our scene. This one here is of course for illumination purposes, very low in resolution, and so there is not a question if we switch 1 or 2 off, because we want to have of course all the light that is in the scene, and with this file size there is no question that we want to do that. I have done this here of course as usual just with my texture, and when I go here to the texture tool you see it's flat, and I have adjusted this always in a way so it fits exactly one of the faces of the cube. When you want to do this and you are perhaps pretty new to Cinema 4D, you go to a cube, and inside of the attributes manager and objects there is a separate surface. This needs to be checked on, and when you click then the C or this icon here, you get all 6 faces automatically, and you can apply the texture to it. You have to set of course the projection then in the right way to get a cube like this here, where you have exactly these 6 sides then in the way you like. I have used this technique of course in many animations that I had to do in my life, and one was to put out of the ground 13 architectural visualization with inside view in 4 weeks, and all on my own. I needed to fake some camera moves with exactly this technique. Works fantastically for architectural visualization when you have maybe a connection shot where the camera goes from one room to the next and you just have to have a pan, and you can switch off very easily some sides here. And I leave this open for the moment being, so you see what I have done here. I go inside of it, move my bitmap preview here out of the picture, and you see here this side is missing. I will switch this on later on, and here we see already that works pretty nice, and the missing side gives you here already an idea what we are doing here. And I switch this back on, and there we have it. And this is of course perfect. It shouldn't be in the size of a standard cube, it should be way bigger. So any camera move that goes away from the 000 point here, that should be then no problem. And the larger the cube is, the more the camera can move without giving away that we have no parallax from this. Parallax is another theme, and I have discussed this in another series of course, but this here gives a wonderful option to create reflections, and when you have a higher resolution you can even pick out some faces, and that is maybe enough to just make a camera move like this and then go to the next scene and cut. And the beauty is, if you need a longer pan with the camera or a shorter one, you just set this up in keyframes and you are there. There's not a lot of render time needed for that. It's pretty fast. Okay, thanks for listening. Have fun with it. Bye bye.